The holographic display filled the lecture hall with images of impossible worlds. Volcanic hellscapes, frozen wastelands, planets where the very air could melt metal or freeze blood in seconds. Professor Talindra floated at the center of the amphitheater, her translucent body pulsing with soft blue light as she addressed 200 students. She was old by Valorian standards, her tentacles moving with the careful grace of someone who had taught this course for 60 years. Class, 12 death worlds represent the absolute limit of biological adaptation, she said, her voice resonating through the universal translators embedded in every seat. Beyond this classification, sapient life becomes mathematically impossible. Daniel Webb sat in the back row. He had learned 3 months ago that sitting in front made other students nervous, though none of them could explain why. He was smaller than most species here, with no claws, no armor, no visible weapons. Just a soft-skinned mammal with strange, forward-facing eyes. The energy requirements alone would prevent neural development. Professor Talindra continued. Any organism evolved for such extreme survival would dedicate all biological resources to physical adaptation. There would be nothing left for higher cognition. She brought up a new hologram showing a mathematical model. Numbers and equations spiraled through the air, proving her point with cold precision. Furthermore, apex predators on such worlds would be solitary by necessity. Competition for resources would prevent the social structures required for civilization. This is why no Class 12 species has ever achieved spaceflight, and why apex predators from such worlds cannot exist as sapient beings. Daniel had heard variations of this lecture before, in diplomatic briefings, in the careful questions other species asked when they thought they were being subtle, in the way security officers watched him a little too closely when he walked through crowded corridors. The Galactic Union had a story about humans. Harmless newcomers, cooperative, friendly, a bit fragile, perhaps, but eager to learn from their betters. Daniel had been happy to play along. It made things easier, but something about today felt different. Maybe it was the absolute certainty in the professor's voice. Maybe it was the way a Finari student in the front row, a small fox-like creature named Kira, kept glancing back at him with curious eyes. Maybe he was just tired of pretending. His hand rose slowly. Professor Talindra paused mid-sentence. In 3 months, the human had never spoken in class. Several students turned to look, their various sensory organs focusing on the small figure in the back row. Yes, Student Webb. Daniel stood. He always forgot how much taller he was than most species here until he unfolded from his seat. Professor, I was wondering about Earth's classification in the Galactic database. A ripple of confusion passed through the room. The professor's tentacles twitched with mild amusement. I believe Earth is classified as a garden world, Student Webb. Temperate climate, stable geology, breathable atmosphere. Quite pleasant by galactic standards. I think that information might be outdated, Daniel said. His voice was calm, almost gentle. Could someone check the current classification? Kira's paws flew across her datapad before anyone else could move. Her ears flattened against her skull as she read the results. Class 14, she whispered. The room went silent. Professor Talindra's glow flickered. That cannot be correct. Class 14 would mean extreme gravity, toxic atmosphere, dangerous radiation levels, extreme temperature variations, and active geological instability. No garden world could possibly. Earth has all of those, Daniel said. Our gravity is considered crushing by galactic standards. Our atmosphere contains a corrosive gas that most species find toxic. Our star bombards us with radiation. Our temperatures swing between freezing and boiling, depending on location and season. We have earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, hurricanes, tsunamis, and something called winter that kills millions of organisms every year. He paused. We also have apex predators. A massive Colonian student named Boros rose from his seat, his shell plates clicking with agitation. The databases say humans are prey animals. Scavengers at best. You have no natural weapons. Daniel turned to look at him. For just a moment, something shifted in his expression. The polite smile remained, but his eyes changed. They became the eyes of something that had spent 2 million years chasing other animals until they collapsed from exhaustion. Something that had learned to read the signs of weakness the way other species read text. Boros sat down hard, his legs giving out beneath him. 10 million years of herbivore instinct screamed at him that he was being evaluated, that something was deciding whether he was worth the effort of killing. Then Daniel blinked, and he was just a friendly human exchange student again. "We have no natural weapons," Daniel agreed. "So we made our own. We hunted everything on our planet. The fast ones, the strong ones, the ones with claws and teeth and armor. We chased them until they died from exhaustion, and then we ate them." Professor Talindra had stopped floating. Her body had gone completely still. "What manner of being," she asked slowly, "evolves on a class 14 Deathworld?" Daniel looked around the lecture hall. 200 students stared back at him, and for the first time, they truly saw what had been sitting among them for 3 months. "That is an excellent question, Professor," he said. "I think we have a lot to discuss." Nobody moved. 200 students sat frozen in their seats as Daniel walked slowly down the amphitheater steps toward the center of the room. Professor Talindra drifted backward without seeming to realize she was doing it. "Humans are pursuit predators," Daniel said, his voice carrying easily through the silent hall. "Most predators on Earth use ambush tactics. They hide, they strike, they kill quickly. If they miss, they give up." He stopped in the middle of the room, surrounded by aliens who had never imagined something like him could exist. "Humans are different. We do not need to catch our prey on the first attempt. We do not need to be faster or stronger. We just need to be patient." Kira's voice came out as a squeak. "What do you mean, patient? On my world, there is an animal called the antelope. It can run 60 kilometers per hour. Humans can only run about 30 at our fastest, and only for short distances." Boros shifted in his seat, his earlier fear giving way to confusion. "Then how did you hunt them?" "We followed them," Daniel said. "Humans can walk or jog for hours without stopping. Days if necessary. We tracked them by their footprints, their scent, the patterns of bent grass. When they ran, we walked. When they stopped to rest, we appeared on the horizon. They would run again. We would keep walking." The holographic display behind him flickered, but nobody moved to turn it off. Eventually, the antelope would collapse. Its body would overheat. Its legs would fail. And we would be there, still walking, because our bodies can cool themselves through sweating. Most species pant. We perspire. It makes us the greatest endurance hunters our world has ever produced. A Metherian student named Solis, whose body was covered in bioluminescent patches that shifted color with emotion, flickered through several shades of purple. Fear, Daniel had learned. Deep, instinctive fear. "Your species," Solis said slowly, "chased animals until they died of exhaustion." "Yes." "For food." "Yes." "How is that possible?" Professor Talindra asked. "The caloric expenditure alone would require—" "We ate everything," Daniel interrupted gently. "Cooked meat provides far more calories than raw. We learned to use fire millions of years ago. We also ate plants, fruits, roots, insects, fish, birds, eggs, and each other when times were hard enough." Several students made sounds of distress. Daniel ignored them. "We consume toxins for pleasure. Capsaicin, the chemical that makes peppers burn, does nothing to harm us. We bred plants to produce more of it because we enjoyed the sensation. Alcohol is a poison that damages our cells, but we fermented fruits to create it deliberately. Caffeine disrupts the nervous systems of most organisms, but we cultivated entire industries around beverages that contain it." Kira had pulled her datapad close to her chest like a shield. "Why would you do that?" "Because we could. Because it felt good. Because our bodies evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill us. So we developed resistance to almost everything." Boros stood again, his massive shell plates rising like hackles. "This is impossible. If you were truly apex predators, you would be solitary. You would compete, not cooperate. You would never have developed technology or society." Daniel smiled. It was a genuine smile, but somehow that made it worse. We form packs, he said. Not like prey animals huddling for protection. Like wolves. We learned that working together made us more effective hunters. Families became tribes. Tribes became nations. We competed against each other, yes. We fought wars that killed millions. We developed weapons that could crack the crust of our planet. You let that sink in, and then we chose not to use them. We looked at what we could do, what we could destroy, and we decided to build instead. Not because we were weak, because we were strong enough to choose. Professor Talindra's glow had dimmed to almost nothing. The databases said humans were harmless. The databases were edited, Daniel said. Your government decided that the truth about humanity was too frightening for the general population. They classified us as a prey species because the alternative was admitting that Deathworld predators could achieve civilization. He turned in a slow circle, meeting the eyes of every student who would hold his gaze. I'm not telling you this to frighten you. I am telling you because you deserve to know the truth. Humans are predators. We carry 2 million years of hunting instinct in our blood. But we're also more than our instincts. We create art. We form bonds that last lifetimes. We protect those weaker than ourselves. Not because we must, but because we choose to. The lecture hall remained silent for a long moment. Then Kira stood up, her small body trembling, but her voice steady. Why are you here? At this academy. Daniel looked at her, and his expression softened into something almost sad. Because I hoped that someday the galaxy might be ready to meet us as we truly are. Not as the harmless creatures your databases describe, but as partners, as friends. He glanced at Professor Talindra. As equals. The class ended without another word. Students filed out in stunned silence. But 3 of them lingered near the door, watching Daniel as he gathered his things. Kira, Solis, and surprisingly, Boros. I have questions, Kira said. So do I, Boros added, his voice rough. I want to understand how you control it. The thing I saw in your eyes. Solis simply flickered agreement in soft golden light. Daniel looked at the 3 of them, the beginning of something he had not expected to find so far from home. Then let us talk. 2 months passed on Harmony Ring Station. The rumors about Daniel spread through every corridor and cafeteria, growing stranger with each telling. Some said he had killed a student with his bare hands. Others claimed he was a secret military experiment. A few whispered that he was actually gentle and kind, which somehow frightened people even more. Daniel ignored all of it. He had found something more important than reputation. He had found a pack. Kira waited for him every morning outside his quarters, her datapad already filled with questions she had thought of during the night. Why did humans sleep in darkness? Why do they need so much water? How could they possibly enjoy the sensation of capsaicin burning their mouths? Daniel answered every question patiently. He learned that Kira's species, the Fenari, had evolved as burrowing creatures on a cold world. They valued curiosity above all else. A Fenari who stopped asking questions was considered dead inside. Boros joined them for meals, his massive shell taking up 3 seats at their usual table. He never said much, but he listened carefully to everything Daniel described. The Colonians came from a world without predators, where the greatest danger was falling rocks. They had never needed to develop fear. Boros was trying to understand it now. The way his body had frozen when Daniel looked at him. The ancient instinct that had screamed at him to run. He practiced sitting still when Daniel met his eyes, forcing himself to override millions of years of evolution. Daniel respected him for that. Solis was the strangest of the group. The Mytharian rarely spoke aloud, communicating instead through the shifting colors of their bioluminescent patches. They studied extinct species, particularly those wiped out by natural disasters or cosmic events. Daniel fascinated them for a different reason than the others. Your species should not exist, Solis told him one evening, their body glowing soft blue. By every model I have studied, you should have destroyed yourselves or been destroyed by your world. The fact that you survived long enough to develop civilization violates several fundamental theories. Daniel had laughed at that. We almost did not survive. Many times. But humans are stubborn. Stubborn, Solis repeated, tasting the word. Is that the same as persistent? Close enough. The friendship grew slowly, built on shared meals and late-night conversations, and the gradual realization that Daniel was not what any of them had expected. He was patient with Kira's endless questions. He helped Boros overcome his instinctive fear through careful exposure and calm explanation. He discussed extinction events with Solis for hours, sharing stories of species humanity had driven to oblivion and species humanity had fought to save, but there were shadows gathering around them. Daniel noticed them first. Small things that others might miss. The same faces appearing too often in crowds. Conversations that stopped when he approached. Security officers who watched him with cold calculation instead of nervous fear. He mentioned none of this to his friends. There was no point worrying them about something he could not yet prove. Instead, he took them to the observation deck one night, pointing out the distant stars that marked the rough direction of Earth. I was a survival instructor before I came here, he said quietly. I taught people how to live in the wilderness, how to find food and water, how to build shelter, how to stay calm when everything seemed hopeless. Kira tilted her head. Why would you need to teach that? You have cities and technology, because sometimes technology fails. Sometimes cities are too far away, and sometimes the most dangerous thing on Earth is other humans. Boros rumbled low in his throat. You fought each other, constantly, for resources, for territory, for ideas, for reasons that made sense at the time and for reasons that made no sense at all. Daniel turned away from stars. That is why I came here, to prove that we could be more than what we were, that humans could be trusted among other species. And now, Solis asked, their colors shifting to concern violet. After the lecture, Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Now I do not know. I showed them the truth, and I do not know if that was a mistake. Some truths are dangerous. Some doors cannot be closed once opened. Kira moved closer to him, her small body barely reaching his waist. I'm glad you told us. I would rather know the truth than believe a comfortable lie. As would I, Boros said firmly. Solis flickered agreement. Daniel looked at them, these three aliens who had no reason to trust him and every reason to fear him. They had seen what he was capable of. They had felt the weight of 2 million years of predator evolution pressing down on them. And they had chosen to stay out on Earth. There was a word for that. Pact, but he did not say it out loud. Some things were too important for words. But later that night, after his friend had gone to their own quarters, Daniel stood alone on the observation deck and stared at the cold stars and knew that whatever was coming, he would not face it alone. The shadows were growing closer. Someone was watching. Someone was planning. Daniel did not know who or why, but he recognized the feeling from his old life on Earth. He was being hunted, and for the first time in months, the predator inside him began to stir. The message arrived during breakfast. Kira had gone ahead to reserve their usual table, while Daniel stopped at a vendor for something called starfruit juice, which tasted nothing like any fruit he had ever encountered on Earth. His communicator buzzed with an unknown signal. The text was simple. We have the Fenari. Come to docking Base 17 alone and unarmed in 1 hour, or we will demonstrate what happens to those who associate with dangerous animals. Daniel read the message twice. His face showed nothing. The vendor asked if he wanted anything else, and Daniel smiled politely and said no thank you. Then he walked calmly toward his quarters while his mind ran calculations. Docking Base 17 was in the industrial sector, far from the main population areas. Low traffic, limited security coverage. Whoever had taken Kira knew what they were doing. The message mentioned nothing about ransom or demands beyond his presence. That meant they wanted him, not her. She was bait. Daniel reached his quarters and began preparing. He had no weapons by galactic law, but humans had survived for 2 million years before they invented metal tools. His body was weapon enough that he was pulling on his jacket when the door chimed. Boros and Solis stood in the corridor, their faces grim. We know, Boros said. Kira's emergency beacon activated 3 minutes ago. Station security says they are investigating. They will not find her in time, Daniel said flatly. The kidnappers chose their location carefully. Solis flickered orange with distress. What will you do? Daniel looked at them both. These two who had become his friends despite everything their instincts told them. These two who trusted him even knowing what he was. On Earth, we have a concept called pack, he said quietly. It is different from family, different from friendship. Pack means that someone belongs to you in a way that cannot be broken. You would die for them. You would kill for them. You would walk through fire and darkness and hell itself for them. And you would never stop, never rest, never give up until they were safe. He picked up his jacket. Kira is Pack. I'm going to get her back. Boros moved to block the door. His shell plates rose like armor. And for a moment, he looked like the fortress his ancestors had evolved to be. I'm coming with you. No, this is not your fight. These people want me, not you. You told me that courage is not the absence of fear, Boros said, his voice steady despite the trembling in his legs. You told me it is choosing to act despite the fear. I choose. Solis moved to stand beside him, their bioluminescent patches burning bright gold. My species communicates through electromagnetic fields. I can disable security systems, scramble communications, create distractions. You will not be more effective alone. Daniel stared at them. For a moment, something shifted in his expression, something that looked almost like wonder. You understand what you are offering? These people are dangerous. They took Kira to hurt her in front of me. They will not hesitate to hurt you as well. Then we will have to make sure they do not get the chance, Boros said. Daniel was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Stay behind me. Follow my instructions exactly. And if I tell you to run, you run. No arguments. No heroics. Understood. Both of them agreed. They moved through the station quickly, using maintenance corridors and service routes that Daniel had mapped during his first weeks here. Survival instinct. Always know your exits. Always know the paths others overlook. Yes, they walked. Daniel changed. The friendly exchange student faded away, replaced by something older and more dangerous. His movements became fluid, economical. His eyes swept each corridor before he entered it, tracking angles and cover positions without conscious thought. Boros watched him move and finally understood what he had been trying to learn for 2 months. This was not violence. This was not rage. This was focus. Complete, absolute focus on a single purpose. Daniel was hunting. They reached the industrial sector and paused in a maintenance alcove near docking Bay 17. Through a grating, they could see the bay entrance, guarded by 2 Valorians in unmarked uniforms. Solis, Daniel whispered, can you disable the lights in the bay without triggering station alarms? Soft purple glow. Yes. Boros, there's a cargo lift on the far side of the bay. I need you there with this communicator. If anything goes wrong, you contact station security and tell them everything. And you. Daniel looked at the guards. His expression was perfectly calm, perfectly patient. The expression of something that had chased prey across endless grasslands until they collapsed from exhaustion. I'm going to walk in the front door, he said. They're expecting a Deathworld predator to rage in blindly. They want me to prove that humans are uncontrollable monsters. He smiled, and there was nothing friendly in it. I'm going to teach them why control makes us more dangerous, not less. The lights died without warning. Emergency strips flickered red along the floor, casting strange shadows across the docking bay. The 2 guards at the entrance spun toward the darkness, reaching for their weapons. Daniel came out of the shadows like a ghost. He did not run. He walked, steady, unhurried footsteps that echoed through the sudden silence. The guards saw him too late. One raised a stunner. Daniel caught his wrist, twisted, and the weapon clattered to the floor. A precise strike to the throat left the Valorian gasping for air. The second guard lunged forward. Daniel sidestepped, used the guard's momentum against him, and sent him crashing into a stack of cargo containers. Neither guard was dead. Neither guard was permanently injured. But neither guard would be standing up anytime soon. Daniel picked up one of the stunners and moved deeper into the bay. The kidnappers had expected rage. They had expected a Deathworld predator to charge in, screaming and violent, proving every fear the galaxy held about humanity. Instead, they got silence. They got patience. They got the steady approach of something that did not need to hurry because it knew, with absolute certainty, that its prey could not escape. Cressida waited near the far wall with 3 more Valorians. She was older than the others, her translucent body glowing with the deep purple of authority. Kira huddled in a restraint field beside her, eyes wide with terror. "You were supposed to come alone," Cressida said, her voice sharp with irritation. "And you were supposed to be angry." Daniel stopped 10 meters away. The red emergency lights painted him in shades of blood and shadow. "I am angry," he said calmly. "But humans learned long ago that anger is a tool, not a master. We use it when it serves us. We control it when it does not. Impossible. Predators cannot control their instincts. That is what makes them predators. Then perhaps you do not understand predators as well as you believe." Cressida gestured, and her 3 guards spread out to surround him. They were Valorians, ocean hunters from a world of crushing depths. They moved with fluid grace, their tentacles coiling and uncoiling with anticipation. Daniel did not move. "You have been telling lies about humanity," Cressida said, claiming that Deathworld monsters can be civilized, that predators can be trusted. "The Galactic Union has worked for centuries to maintain peace between species. Your existence threatens everything we have built." "My existence?" Daniel asked quietly. "Or the truth about my existence? There's no difference. If the other species learn what humans truly are, there will be panic. Wars. The collapse of the Union itself. And so you decided to kidnap my friend. To force me to act like the monster you want me to be. To prove that humans cannot be trusted." Cressida's glow intensified with satisfaction. "Exactly. Security systems are recording everything. When you attack us, when you prove what you really are, the Union will have no choice but to contain your entire species." Daniel looked at Kira. She was trembling, but her eyes met his, and he saw something there that was not just fear. He saw trust. "What if I do not attack?" Cressida hesitated. "What? What if I prove you wrong? What if I show the recordings that a Deathworld predator can face threats and provocations and choose peace? Then your friend dies, and we try again with someone else." Daniel nodded slowly, as if he had expected this answer. Then he moved. The Valorians were fast. They had evolved to hunt in 3 dimensions, to strike from any angle, to overwhelm prey with coordinated attacks. But they had never faced a pursuit predator before. Daniel did not fight like they expected. He did not trade blows or grapple for advantage. He flowed around their attacks like water, always moving, always shifting position, forcing them to turn and reach and stretch until their bodies were off balance. One Valorian swung a tentacle at his head. Daniel ducked, caught the appendage, and used it to pull the creature off its feet. Another tried to wrap around his legs. He jumped, landed on the tentacle, and drove his heel into the soft body beneath. The third came from behind. Daniel spun, caught the attack on his forearm, and delivered 3 precise strikes to nerve clusters that a Valorian survival guide had mentioned were particularly sensitive. 30 seconds. 3 guards down, none dead, all disabled. Cressida stared at him with something that might have been fear. "How?" she whispered. "I told you," Daniel said, breathing hard but steady. "Control makes us more dangerous, not less. A predator who rages can be predicted. A predator who thinks, who plans, who chooses exactly how much force to apply." He stepped toward her. "That is something else entirely." Cressida reached for a weapon hidden in her robes. Daniel caught her wrist before she could raise it. "Here is what is going to happen," he said quietly. "You're going to release my friend. You're going to hand over the recordings. And you're going to explain to the authorities exactly what you did and why. And if I refuse..." Daniel leaned close. His voice dropped to a whisper that only she could hear. "I have not killed anyone tonight. That was a choice. I want you to understand that every breath you take from this moment forward is because I allow it, not because I am weak, because I am strong enough to choose." He released her wrist. "Now, release my friend." Kira stumbled free of the restraint field and ran to Daniel's side, burying her face against his jacket. He put one arm around her, steady and protective. Cressida watched them, And for the first time, she began to understand what the databases had failed to explain. The most terrifying thing about humans was not their capacity for violence, that it was their capacity for choice. The aftermath moved slowly, like a river finding new paths after a storm. Cressida and her followers were taken into custody. The recordings from the docking bay spread through official channels and then, inevitably, leaked to the public networks. Within days, every species in the Galactic Union had seen a human take down 4 trained Valorian fighters without killing any of them. The reaction was not what anyone expected. Fear, yes. There was plenty of fear, but there's also something else. Curiosity, wonder, a grudging respect that grew stronger as the full story emerged, that a human had been provoked beyond what most species could endure. His friend had been kidnapped. His species had been threatened. And he had responded with precision, with control, with a deliberate choice to spare lives that he could easily have taken. The old databases were updated. The lies about human classification were exposed. For the first time, the galaxy began to see humanity not as harmless newcomers or terrifying monsters, but as something far more complex. Daniel spent 3 days answering questions from security officials, diplomats, and journalists. He gave the same answers each time, patient and calm, never losing his temper despite the repetition. On the 4th day, Professor Talindra requested a private meeting. She floated in her office like a cloud of blue light, tentacles curled inward with what Daniel had learned to recognize as shame. The walls were covered with academic achievements and research awards. A lifetime of teaching, undermined by a single lecture. "I owe you an apology," she said without preamble. "My lecture was based on data I knew to be false. I perpetuated lies that could have caused great harm." Daniel sat across from her, perfectly relaxed. "Why did you do it?" "Because the Union told me to. Because we were afraid." Her glow dimmed. When humans first made contact, the scientific community recognized immediately what you were. A Deathworld species. Apex predators who had somehow achieved civilization and spaceflight. We had never encountered anything like you. And so you lied. We told ourselves it was for the greater good. That the other species would panic if they knew the truth. That it was better to maintain a comfortable illusion than risk destabilizing centuries of peace. She drifted closer to him. We were wrong. I was wrong. The truth about humanity is frightening, yes, but is also inspiring. You showed those students, and now the entire Union, that being capable of violence does not mean being controlled by it. Daniel was quiet for a moment. On Earth, we have a saying. The measure of a person is not what they can do, but what they choose to do. My ancestors could have remained simple predators. They could have consumed everything in their path and destroyed themselves in endless competition. Instead, they built cities, created art, reached for the stars. He met the professor's eyes. That is what makes us human, not the capacity for violence, the capacity for choice. Professor Talindra bowed her body in the Valorian gesture of deep respect. "Will you do something for me? Will you come back to my class and speak? Not as a student, but as a teacher?" Daniel smiled. "I would be honored." 1 week later, the lecture hall was packed beyond capacity. Students filled every seat and crowded the aisles. Some had traveled from other stations just to hear the humans speak. Professor Talindra floated beside the podium, but all eyes were on Daniel. He stood at the center of the amphitheater, exactly where he had stood when he first raised his hand. Kira sat in the front row, recovered from her ordeal and fiercer than ever. Boros stood near the door, his shell plates raised with pride. Solis glowed soft gold from the corner. Daniel looked out at the hundreds of faces watching him. He saw fear in some of them, curiosity in others, hope in a few. "You were told that Deathworld predators cannot exist," he began. "That the biological requirements were too extreme. That no species could evolve sapience while also being apex hunters on a class 14 world." He paused. "I am here to tell you that we do exist. Humanity evolved on a world that tried to kill us every single day. We developed persistence hunting, toxic resistance, and pack bonds that transcend death. We are everything your databases claimed was impossible." The room was absolutely silent. But I'm also here to tell you that what makes humanity special is not our claws. We do not have claws. It is not our fangs. We do not have fangs. It is not our strength or our speed or our endurance, though we have all of those in measures that terrify us sometimes. He looked at Kira, at Boros, at Solis. What makes us special is that we looked at a universe of fear and chose to build something better. We could have remained predators forever, trapped in cycles of violence and competition. Instead, we learned to cooperate, to protect, to love. He spread his hands. We're not asking you to forget what we are. We're asking you to see what we choose to be. Partners instead of predators. Protectors instead of threats. Friends, if you'll have us. The silence stretched for a long moment. Then Kira raised her hand. Daniel smiled at her, warm and genuine. Yes, where do we sign up? Laughter rippled through the hall, breaking the tension like sunlight through clouds. Daniel laughed too, a human sound that most of them had never heard before. You already did, he said, the moment you chose to stay. And somewhere in the back of the hall, a Valorian student raised her hand and asked the first of many questions. The future was uncertain. Change would be difficult. But for the first time in galactic history, a Deathworld predator stood among the stars as something more than a monster. He stood as a promise.